Is this a FUD gun?
Well, it is a P80. I mean, yeah, kind of it's a FUD gun.
Dude, FUDs ain't building P80s.
Dude, it's a...
They're out there trying to get them banned.
A non-FUD...
That's not a hunting rifle.
A non-FUD would just own a Glock 34 instead of having an imitation P80. Welcome to 2-8 Cops, Cops Supporting Gun Rights. Our hosts, Keith and Matt, have over 50 years combined experience as police officers serving in California. In this podcast, we'll talk about all things related to the Second Amendment from a cop's perspective and dispel the myth that cops are for over-the-top gun control. Hello, welcome to the 2-8 Cops podcast. I'm Keith.
And I'm Matt.
And today we're going to talk about how to protect yourself when you disobey an unlawful order.
From a working cop standpoint, them disobeying the unlawful order. Just to clarify, because it seemed to be something people were missing when they read the written article.
Yes. And this is based off our article on the 2A Cops website. It was so popular, it crashed our web server because so many people were reading it, and our stats look great this month because of that. But we wanted to talk about it a little bit more and just get our final word into it, where maybe some stuff, we want to talk about some stuff that wasn't in the article that we think is important. And we think it's important now more than ever because there is a lot of bad stuff happening in our country, and we know cops are going to be faced with some decisions, and we know that cops are going to make the right decision, but we want them to protect themselves so that when they do say no, we're not going to do that they don't get fired right away, because you do nobody any good if you're kicked to the curb, because you need to keep fighting the good fight. So across the board, cops want to abide by the Constitution, and they are. And we're just going to help you go through that. And we know from our own personal experience, because at least for me, I worked for a department. It was a good department. But every once in a while, you have people come up with crazy ideas and do stupid things. And my department was perfect in this regard. So as an example, we had a group that came to our city, and they would proselytize down in the central business district. And they would say horrible things, like as a couple would walk by, they would yell out, your wife is going to die because you're a masturbator and your daughter's a whore. And it was just horrible stuff. They're not Christians. They're just bad people. And
I bet they proclaim to be Christians, though.
What was that?
I bet you nothing. That's just a personal side note. Never mind.
Shut
up.
We were getting complaints, but what it came down to is there was no violation of law. It's well within the First Amendment, and we would educate citizens on the First Amendment and tell them there's nothing we can do, and we'd walk away. So City Hall kept getting complaints, and they felt that the best thing that they can do was pass a law, a city ordinance that was a misdemeanor. And I shit you not, the city ordinance said you can only practice free speech in groups of 3 or more between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. on Wednesdays at Pioneer Park.
I'm going to go out on a guess here and say that the people that were causing these problems, there was a group of 2.
Yes.
Hey.
And
how to read between the lines.
When they brought that up in a staff meeting, every sergeant looked at each other like, we're getting punked, aren't we? Like, this is the Gong Show, but for cops. Because nobody could be that fucking stupid to pass a law like that, right?
Yeah. No, that's not screaming for a lawsuit later down the road.
And they did it. They passed a law. They showed it to us, and we're like, we all the sergeants started laughing out loud, and all these, the city attorney and all these higher ups just looked butthurt. And I was the senior sergeant. And so it's up to me to speak up. And I came out and just said, yeah, we're not enforcing that. And they're like, oh, but you're going to have to. And I'm like, no, I don't. The Constitution specifically says they have a right to free speech, and this is unlawful. And no. And we kept talking. And finally, I'm like, I can't put this any stronger. We're going to get sued. And I want to be able to say in my deposition that I warned you that this was going to happen. So here we are. I'm going to let you know this right now. And I've used that tact a lot for dumb decisions. And I have been in depositions where, nope, I specifically told them I was worried about being here in a deposition. And I told them no, but yet here we are. And it's kind of a funny part in a deposition, but it takes it off of you, right?
Right.
And here sure enough, we got a call. They sent my guys. I got on the radio and told them, yeah, we're not going to respond to that. Everybody disregard. The captain calls me and tells me you're going to do it. And I told him we're not. And so he went out and did it himself. And now there's a lawsuit. Imagine that. And it's on a side note, it reminds me of Moscow, Idaho, where the church group was out there singing psalms and the cops arrested them. Remember the cops?
This is just recently, right?
Yes. You see the police out there arresting them for not wearing a mask. And everybody's like, the cops are violating their constitutional order. Hold on. When you look at who's making the arrest, it's a captain. You never see captains making an arrest. And it reminded me of my own incident where you probably had a bunch of cops saying, yeah, fuck that. I'm not going to do that. And then so the captain's like, I'm going to show you. I'm going to do it myself. And then it blows up in their face, right? Captains don't make arrests. So if you see a captain making an arrest, that means all the cops said, yeah, I'm not doing that. So that's my personal opinion. I have nothing to back it up, but that's what happened with me, right? And so in that case, I had notes from the staff meeting minutes that showed that we were putting up objections. I also documented in my personal diary, or journal. I have a journal that I kept, and I documented everything. And that day, when I went home, I realized that we were going to get sued. So I wrote everything down: what was said, who said what, who was there. So that way, when I go to a deposition, I can actually give them that copy of that page and say, here's all the info to protect myself.
Yep. Not along the same. I mean, it wasn't. I never had to deal with any of that personally. I mean, I was just a patrol deputy, so if it was going on, it was sergeants and above that had to deal with that as far as administration goes. I don't recall anything like that ever coming up where I worked. Although, I mean, there's not been a patrol cop out there who hasn't gone to a call where somebody's complaining about something someone else said to them. And I used to just tell people, look, it's not illegal to be an asshole. You can have some guy who's completely rude, tell people whatever he wants, and there's people calling the cops. I don't want that guy to say that anymore. It totally different scheme of things, but still, they're wanting somebody silenced because they don't like what's being said.
Yeah, the big thing here is to know the Constitution and know your case law. As an example, there's a lot of people that say, Matt, you've had this. They're like, this is a violation of the Constitution. And you're like, we read the same Constitution?
Right.
Because I don't remember seeing that in there. And for me, I've read all cops have a constitutional law class, but they cherry pick it. They just say like, all right, this is the First Amendment, Second Amendment, but nowhere did they actually make you read it. From cover to cover.
And along the same lines you're talking about, I mean, it's the same kind of thing. I mean, think of how many videos you've watched where somebody's screaming, you can't arrest me because you didn't read me my Miranda rights. I don't have to read you your Miranda rights to arrest you, only if I'm going to question you. Yes. So you see these Facebook lawyer, constitutional scholar guys who run around screaming stuff, and then everybody who's following them on Facebook or on Twitter or on YouTube starts spouting the same nonsense.
My all-time favorite, every undercover narc feels me when I say this.
You have to tell me if you're a cop.
You know what I'm going to say. When you're working undercover and you're buying drugs from somebody, they're like, if you're a cop, you have to tell me you're a cop because the Constitution says so. Fuck, you're right. I'm not a cop. I guess we're safe. Yeah. Bonus points if you're the narc and you say that while you're working undercover to the drug dealer. Because it's nice to do it to them and say, hey, man, if you're a cop, you've got to tell me because the Constitution says that. Oh, no, I'm not a cop. Man, they think you're clean. You'll buy dope all day long doing that. So the big thing, know the Constitution and case law because there are exemptions, not exemptions. There are
exceptions.
Exceptions. There you go. Exceptions to the First Amendment, Second Amendment, Fourth Amendment. And people are like, oh, hold on. How is there exceptions to the First Amendment? Well, an example. What's that?
The screaming fire in a crowded movie theater. They use that one all the time.
Yeah. Or like
try and justify certain things.
Hey, Matt, you made me mad. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to show up to your house. I'm going to blow your brains out. This is how I'm going to do it. And I'm going to do it tonight at 6:00. You better hide.
Keith, that's a crime, sir.
And it's
the whole, when you violate the law, it kind of makes, there's certain things that it was like when, how do you get your guns taken away from you? By violating the law while you're armed.
Yes.
Same thing. Just because you have the freedom of speech doesn't mean there's freedom from repercussions of that speech.
Yes. And, there's exceptions to the Second Amendment. Felons can't have a firearm, and I know people are like, there should be no exceptions, Well, that one has been through court, and it's been up to, I think, has it been to the Supreme Court? Has that one gone to the Supreme Court?
I don't know on that one.
That one I know has been to the Circuit Court, which is the last step before you go to the Supreme Court. So, again, there are exceptions. Fourth Amendment has lots of exceptions. You're on probation and parole, and you waive your right to search and seizure. So you choose that the police and parole and probation can search you at any time in exchange for not being in custody. So there are exceptions to the Constitution. You have to know those. Mine was pretty simple. Go and arrest these people for exercising free speech. Yeah, I'm not going to do that.
I'm gonna hard pass.
In fact, you can go fuck yourself.
Right.
The best way to do it, though, to be honest, is just like, no, that violates the Constitution. I can't do that. And just no. And be polite about it. Don't be like Matt and I. It's like, no, go fuck yourself. We're not going to do that. Certainly if you're the crusty 25-year veteran, it's a little bit easier to do that. But
right.
If you're a rookie, ain't going to happen. Right.
It's easy when you're on the 2 bad day plan.
Yes. Right. So you got to explain to them what the 2 day bad, 2 day.
If I have 2 bad days in a row, I'm done.
Because you can retire.
Right.
And unfortunately, though, anybody that can retire is leaving.
Yeah, they're already gone at this point.
Every day is a bad day right now for law enforcement. So, look, know the Constitution, know your case law. A lot of people, and I hate this, you see a lot of civilians go, just quit. And it's like, well, that's dumb, because if I quit, who's going to take my place? A guy that's going to follow those orders?
The only people they're hiring right now are the people you don't want them hiring. They're people that are just, I shouldn't say not all of them, but the hiring pool, even 4 or 5 years ago when I was teaching out at EVOC, the hiring pool has drastically dried up. I mean, it wasn't saying anything negative about the people that are going through the academy at the time, but when I applied to go through our academy at the department I worked at, there was 1,000 people applying for 70 positions.
Same. That's the way it was for me too.
When I was working at EVOC, so 22, 23 years after I went through the academy, there's still 70 positions and there's like 150 people applying. They're putting people in the academy positions that they know they're not going to hire because they won't pass a background check, but they need to fill seats.
So you want the guys that are working right now to continue working. So leaving isn't an option.
Or it's not a good option.
There are last case scenarios, right? Like I wrote this article and then I got contacted by an officer that works in one of the 10 largest police agencies in America. And I'm just saying largest 10 because I don't want to narrow down which agency he works for. But he has thousands of coworkers. And he wrote me an email and said, I work in an agency where I fear the decisions they're going to make. They don't believe in the Constitution. They're screwing up every day. I mean, this is not an average city. This is obviously one of the 10 biggest cities in America, and it is in a liberal bastion. For him, he was basically like, what do I do? Because, if they keep violating the Constitution, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And I'm like, well, where you live or where you work, the citizens don't care that their constitutional rights are being violated. They truly believe that this is all okay. It's time for you to pop smoke and go to another agency.
Yeah, if you can, unless you're like a year from retirement or something like that. If you've got 5 years or more, leave.
Yeah. And, for him, it was easy because he can go to another agency. He was a good cop. It was easy for him to go. I do believe, though, that walking away is a last case scenario. The best thing is if you say, no, I'm not going to do this because it's unconstitutional, and it is, and you can back it up, that you document everything. Remember, your video camera's got to be on all the time, right? So make sure that you're recording this. Make sure that you got documentation.
And if you don't have video cameras, turn on your phone and record it.
Yes. Or
and just say, look,
audio recorder.
I'm going to audio record this because I disagree with this and you're telling me to do something. I think it's unconstitutional. Don't have to hide it. Be upfront about it.
I did do that one time. I worked for a chief that was not a good man. And
funny how some of those guys make it all the way to chief.
I know, right? I've worked with some good chiefs. He was not one. He brought me in and says, I want to know about this one incident. And I'm like, well, is this line of questioning going to lead to disciplinary action? And he goes, I asked to know what's going on. Just tell me. And I'm like, well, it could lead to disciplinary action. It's not. And I'm like, no offense, but I don't trust you. And by then I was very senior and crusty, right? And he's like, you'll tell me right now. And I'm like, are you going to hold this against me? And he goes, no, it's not going to lead to disciplinary action. Now tell me what happened. So I pulled out my recorder, opened it up and said, I'm here with Chief so-and-so. And he just told me that this is not going to lead to disciplinary action. And go ahead, Chief, what's your question? And he looked at me like, you motherfucker. Now, not everybody can do that, right? I had the seniority and the knowledge to back up what I was doing. Some of you may not be in that position. But if you can record it. If you got witnesses that aren't going to be pussies and like stab you in the back later, right? They're good witnesses. You want to document all of that. And let me tell you this documentation. We're jumping up a little ahead about documenting, but I did keep a journal of every single thing. Like I had a chief that said, hey, we can't, in a staff meeting, we can't hire that person because we need more females and minorities and he's white. And we have enough white people. So let's hire this. And, I spoke up and it's like, hey, chief, you can't do that. It's a violation of city policy and state law. Well, this is the way it is. Awesome. I documented all that. Who was there? Who was present? Kept track of all that stuff. When I left, I gave that to the assistant city manager. And he's like, why? I don't need this. And I'm like, well, I know somebody's going to sue the department at some point. And when I'm in my deposition, I'll be able to say I gave you all this information because I'll give it to the council for discovery. They didn't like it, but it feels good that when the man is trying to call you out, that you have everything. You have all your I's dotted, your T's crossed, and you can bring that forward. Whatever you can do to protect yourself is really paramount.
I have a hard time believing I'm going to say this, but I think you were more of a troublemaker at work than I was.
You know what it was? I don't know. I know my old supervisors are listening right now, and they're like, "Yeah, he was an asshole." I can tell you right now, I was treated like shit in my first couple of years, and I learned how to stick up for myself. And I learned that when I fought back, they didn't screw with you as much.
Kind of like the whole bully thing in the school ground.
Yep. And I noticed that the more I just kept my mouth shut, the more they, kept screwing with me. And when I finally put my foot down and started documenting everything and calling, showing proof that they were the assholes, my life got a little bit easier, to be honest. Look, Matt came up with this one. It was my title, Pretend Policing. But Matt actually came up with basically pretending like you're doing the job when you're not.
You calling me a lazy piece of crap?
No, actually, it was really smart. Brother, it was actually really smart, man. I wasn't going to put it in the article till you mentioned it. And I'm like, that's actually brilliant. But go ahead and talk about it, man. I think it's a smart way of doing things.
I'm trying. I know you got that from what I wrote, but I'm not even remembering exactly what it was I wrote that time.
Basically, it's like, oh, I don't see that AR-15 right there.
Sorry. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah. It was, and I wasn't doing it to. It wasn't where a crime had occurred per se. It was a victimless crime. It was a gun control registry crime kind of thing, where I get the one that jumps out at the top of my head was I got a call of a person walking down a major thoroughfare in Sacramento in a urban part of the just in the city with a couple rifles. And I'm like, that seems odd. You'd think you'd be getting more than one call about it, but it was only one call. And this is rush hour. So there's, a ton of vehicle traffic. It just shows how oblivious most people driving around are. I roll up, sure as shit, this person's walking down the street. They got a couple of rifles sticking out of a backpack and they're carrying two in their other hands. It's some probably mid-30s woman. She's just walking along. So I ended up pulling over and stopping her and talking to her. She had no clue. She was from Montana, I think it was, or Wyoming, or, one of the free American states.
She was from the United States.
She was from the United States, not from California. Correct. And she had come into town because a relative had passed away and she had inherited these firearms. She had no clue it was illegal to walk down the street carrying a gun. I said, "Hey,
totally normal in free America."
Right. So I said, "Hey, tell you what, where are you going?" And she was going to an address in my district. And I'm like, "Let's put your stuff in my trunk. I'll give you a ride there." So, technically she's in violation of California's open carry law. But I'm not going to arrest a normal law abiding citizen for doing something that was not, there's no victim. If there'd been a huge car crash because people were swerving because, oh my God, crazy person with a gun, that would be a little bit different scenario, but none of that had happened. So yeah, I just pretended like there was nothing there.
Exactly.
I didn't lie on the computer about her not having guns or anything. I just typed in when I cleared my call, I said, gave ride to home she was staying at. Done. Just kind of ignored the rest.
And that's the most important part. Don't lie.
Because you lie, you'll get fired.
On the Brady list. And then you're screwed. But you can also just pretend like you handled the call, dismiss it, make some lame, way of dispositioning it, and then moving on with your life.
Yeah, just kind of skirt around it without lying.
Exactly. It's pretend policing.
Yeah. What I did for most of my career. Just kidding.
Not really.
But not really.
All right. So you should be a member of the Fraternal Order of Police, and you want to do that so that way you can get the legal defense fund. When your department decides to come after you because you decided to disobey an unlawful order and they try to come after you, the expenses of the attorney fees are going to be really expensive. I know for me, I received more in LDF funds than I put into it. And I know a bunch of people are cursing me because their LDF rates went up, but that's what happens.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. I never got sued.
I may have been sued. My department may have come after me once, and I've won every time, by the way. And there's nothing better than being victorious when they try to come after you.
Well, that speaks to the difference between the two departments we worked for. And I'm not knocking your department, but I worked for an elected sheriff, whereas you worked for an appointed chief.
Yes.
So there's a little bit of difference there too.
And you're right. It's true. The other thing is, I don't want to say my department was small. I had 100 officers, which is a medium-sized agency for the rest of the U.S., but small when you're in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Right.
For you, you had at least 1,000.
1,800 full-time people on our department, and then not counting on-calls and reserves.
So larger agencies, they tend to not worry about the minutia, where smaller agencies just nitpick the fuck out of you and never stop. So the stuff that my department came after me for, Matt's department would not have. So that would be the difference between some of these agencies.
Yep.
But you're going to need legal defense fund. And, my son's a new cop, and I told him right away, you need to get LDF. And he, kind of hem and hawed about it until somebody from his department sat down with him and said, you need LDF. They love you now, but at some point they're not.
Well, you're just dad. What do you know?
Exactly. Right. I'm just some old boomer.
Shut up, boomer.
At least I'm not a FUD.
Stop it. Hang on a second. 1911.
Was that your 1911?
That was my 1911.
Okay. You're the FUD boss at the end of the battle.
Quickly running out of bullets and the gun jamming.
But, you know, it's really important to have that LDF. You got to protect yourself. Two more things we want to talk about. Second to the last, supervisors are the first line of defense. If the biggest problem with these unconstitutional orders coming down is it goes through layers of supervision of nobody saying that's a dumb idea until it finally gets to the sergeant. Like for us, it went through lieutenant, it went through the city management, it went through the police management, and then finally it's the sergeants that are like, this is stupid. What are we doing? No, we're not going to do that. Why did it even get to the sergeant level? It should have been squashed at the chief level. It really should have been squashed at the city attorney level.
Yeah, exactly. You'd think the guys that know the law would be the ones squashing it, but usually not.
What the fuck were they thinking? You know, so for supervisors, look, man, if you can't tell somebody we're not going to do something unlawful,
what's your job as a supervisor? As a line supervisor, is protect your troops.
And I can't tell you
and that includes from management.
Yes. I can't tell you how many times as a sergeant, like, look, man, if you screwed up, then you got what's coming to you. But I can't tell you how many times as a sergeant. I had more times as a sergeant where people would be like, above me would be like, hey, we need to go talk to this guy about this. And I'm like, no, he did everything right. Like, no, we're not going to do that. And this is why. Every time they would be like, oh, okay. And that was the end of it. And all I can think the entire time was like, where the fuck were my supervisors when I was a young officer? There's a couple times that and it was great because like one time they wanted me to discipline this one guy who did everything right. And they're like, well, you're being insubordinate, meaning I'm insubordinate because they want me to write them up and I'm refusing.
Right.
And I'm like, well, that's fine. You go ahead and write them up. And that's what I got, dead air. And it's like, oh, it's different when you got to put your name pen to paper. See, if you write him up, then I'm going to go to his arbitration hearing and I'm going to support him because he did everything right. And they ended up backing down and leaving him alone. And it was a pretty significant thing they were accusing him of, but I was there when the incident occurred. It had to do with excessive use of force on a guy that just killed two people. And he was completely within the guidelines for use of force. He was he didn't even shoot the guy and he was clearly could have shot the guy and he didn't. And I'm like, I went up to him and said, you did a great job. I don't think anybody could have done that any better. I'm glad you were here. You saved lives. Right.
Including the shitbag murderer.
Yeah. And now they want me to write them up. And it's like, no, it was within our policy. In fact, we should be giving him an award for not blasting the guy. But as a supervisor, that's your job, man. It's uncomfortable. You have these uncomfortable conversations. And if you can't do it, then get the fuck out. Supervision is hard. Leadership is hard. The hardest job I ever had, the best job I ever had was sergeant, and the hardest job I've ever had was sergeant. And trust me, I wasn't a perfect sergeant. I don't think I did a great job, but I know I saved a lot of people from getting in trouble when somebody would have come after them and gone after them. For our citizens, words matter. If you're saying stuff like online, saying stuff like, just remember your oath, that's pretty insulting.
We've never heard that one before. And we don't think about that on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Shit, I'm retired and I think about that on a daily basis.
And you know what I found is the people that say, just remember your oath, are people that never had to take an oath.
Right.
They never served in the military. They've done nothing to protect this country except be a keyboard warrior in their mom's basement.
Come on, dude, man. Being part of Cop Block is for the country.
So instead of saying something like, and I think some people are saying it and they're not thinking about it. They don't think it sounds bad, right? But it's like when you have a young officer and you're like, oh, are you a rookie? That's bad. Don't call somebody a rookie, even if they are. It's bad, right? just instead of saying just remember your oath or I hope you remember your oath, look, man, they haven't forgotten. They took it. They're the ones that have to make the difficult decisions, not you.
Every day.
The best thing that you can do is just say something simple like, hey, man, thanks for having my back. I got yours. I've had citizens say that, and I'm just like, fuck yeah. And it emboldens you. It's like, yeah, I'm going to do everything I can to protect you. Because
you see that a lot where we live now. You didn't see that a lot where we both came from.
Yes, you're right.
Sorry,
I remember I was in Oakland. We had 20 SWAT teams hitting a very violent group that was killing people. And, you're in Oakland, you think everybody hates the police. But I remember this lady walked past me and she just whispered, thank you so much for having our back. And then she kept walking on. That changed my whole view of that whole incident. Because there were a bunch of people out there yelling, fuck the police. But she risked it. I mean, we're in a bad place. If people knew what she said, they would take action against her. And I thought that was really cool to hear that from her. And it made me feel really good. And dude, this is 20 years later and I still remember that like it was yesterday.
Yeah, you go into crappy ghetto neighborhoods and it's the people who are friends with the gangbangers and the people that are out ripping stuff off. They're the ones that are screaming at you. The people who are tax-paying, hardworking people, they want you there.
Exactly.
But they're afraid to say anything in front of all their neighbors because then their house is going to get trashed as soon as you leave.
Exactly.
So yeah, I got to give that lady props. That takes some guts to do that in that situation.
Yep. So look, for those of you that aren't cops that are listening to this, look, man, they know about their oath. They are really stressed out right now trying to keep their job, and they are abiding by the Constitution. Don't look at the news and see one incident of one guy like that jackass up in Moscow, Idaho. That captain. I mean, come on, dude. I know what's going on. You're a captain making an arrest. All your guys said no. He doesn't represent all of Moscow Police Department.
If it was happening as often as it was, there wouldn't be 5 videos of it. There would be thousands.
Yes, exactly. And I think it's really important for you to just take time out when you're online and you see something. Just say, hey, thank you, officers, for having our back. We got yours. And, there's going to be the stupid cop blockers that come out going, oh, bootlicker or whatever. Like, as long as it's not your first day on the internet, you should be able to ignore it just like the rest of us. But, when you see a cop out in public, just walk up and tell him, thank you for having our back. Let him know that you've got his. Let him know that you support him and just say thank you. And he may look like a robot and be like, well, thank you, sir. But I can guarantee when he gets back in his car, he's going to be like, oh, that's pretty cool.
It's one of those things that you're very happy to hear it, but you're like, how the hell do I respond to that?
Oh, it was especially where you and I worked. People don't do that. And so
every once in a while getting coffee or something like that, you'd have somebody say something to you, but it was, and every time I was like, I don't know how to say, thank you. I mean, it just feels, it's like, what do you say?
Because where you and I worked, there were so many people saying, fuck you, fuck the police, ACAB, doing all their typical stuff. And then you got a dude that comes up and just says, hey, thank you. You're just like, am I being punked? Is this for real?
The joke was he waved with all 5 fingers.
Right. And I'm not kidding. I remember like on one of my final days as a cop, I was in Starbucks and this guy comes up and says, hey, thank you. Let me buy your coffee. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, let me buy your coffee. And he bought it. And I'm like, thank you. And I was in such shock that happened. Then when I got back in my car, I felt guilty because I'm like, oh, I should have told him like, thank you. And I should have done like all these other things. But like, I literally was dumbfounded.
Yeah.
That somebody actually did that because I'd never had that happen before, ever. But anyways, that's our final thoughts. Matt, you got anything else for everybody before we cut it out?
No, nothing I can think of off the top of my head.
All right. We got dark days ahead. Just keep your head up. Know that the public likes what you're doing and don't listen to the naysayers. If you guys can do us a favor, can you rate us, subscribe, and review us on iTunes? We got 11 5-star reviews. We've got thousands of downloads, so we know thousands of people are listening, but it would be really cool if you guys went on and rated and reviewed us. It'd be nice to have a good written review. If you're going to write something negative, do it to another podcast.
Send it to us via message.
There you go. And if you guys want to know something, if you want to know more, hit us up at podcast@2acops.com and just ask us a question or something you want us to cover, because like we're struggling sometimes to come up with topics, and we just like to hear what you have to say. So that's it for now. Stay safe, be careful, have a great week. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to and rate 2A Cops on your favorite podcast service. You can subscribe to our newsletter and get current 2A news at 2acops.com. If you have any questions you want answered on the podcast, email us at podcast@2acops.com.